Detective Mira Sato had seen 31 bodies in 14 years. None of them looked like this one. The woman in apartment 604 sat upright at her kitchen table, hands folded, eyes closed, as if she'd simply decided to stop breathing mid-sentence. No wounds, no forced entry, no struggle. The neighbors said they'd heard her talking to someone every night for the past 3 weeks, long, calm conversations bleeding faintly through the wall. But her phone records showed no calls. The building's log showed no visitors. And taped to the underside of the table, in a spot only someone crouched beneath it would ever find, was a note in the victim's own handwriting, the ink pressed so hard it had almost torn the paper. "He counts down. I'm running out of nights." Sato pulled the file. Elena Voss, 34, freelance translator, lived alone, no family in the city, no known enemies. She almost closed it as an unexplained but isolated death, until she checked the building's records and felt the floor tilt slightly under her. 3 other tenants across the past 6 years had died in that exact unit under nearly identical conditions, seated, peaceful, untouched. Each one left a note. Each note, in different handwriting, said the same 6 words: "He counts down." Management had simply repainted the building and relisted the apartment each time, as if grief were a stain you could just cover. No one had ever connected the deaths. Sato laid 4 case files across her desk in a neat row, the years stretching back further than she'd expected, and felt the specific, quiet horror of watching a pattern step out of hiding. Sato made a call her captain would never approve. She requested the unit reopened and moved in herself, alone, with a hidden recorder and her service weapon on the nightstand. The first night gave her nothing but ordinary sounds, creaking pipes, the fridge's tired hum, the loneliness of an unfamiliar ceiling. The second night, at exactly 2:14 a.m., she awoke to a voice, low, male, coming from inside the wall behind her headbed. It wasn't shouting, wasn't moaning. It was calm, almost tender, like someone narrating a bedtime story to a child who could no longer hear it. She couldn't make out the words. She lay frozen, watching the wallpaper for movement that wasn't there, and noticed the voice paused every few seconds, as if it waiting for an answer it never received. When she finally pressed her ear to the plaster, the voice stopped instantly, like it had felt her listening. By morning, Sato had the building's original blueprint spread across an archive table, and there it was, a narrow service crawl space running behind the bedroom wall, sealed during a renovation 11 years ago, the same year the first tenant died. She tracked down the retired architect, who went quiet the moment she said 604. After a long breath, he told her that crawl space was never meant to be sealed with anyone still inside it. A crew worker had gone missing during that renovation. Management called it a resignation and never filed a report. No one had looked for him, not once. Sato sat with the blueprint open on her lap, the crawl space traced in fading blue ink like a wound the building had learned to hide under new paint, and understood with a cold and total certainty that whatever spoke through that wall each night had been waiting behind it for over a decade. That night, Sato didn't sleep. She sat facing the wall, recorder running, notepad open. At 2:14, precisely on schedule, the voice returned, and for the first time she caught real words, counting backward. 7, 6, 5. 10 seconds between each number, unhurried, almost gentle, exactly as the neighbors had described. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. When it reached 1, the silence that followed had weight to it. And then came 3 slow knocks from inside the wall, evenly spaced, deliberate, nothing like an old building settling. A reply. Confirmation that whatever was on the other side knew without doubt that she was listening back. Elena Voss's note hadn't been a metaphor. Something had been counting down toward every tenant's final night for 11 years, patient as rust. And Sato understood, with her pulse loud in her ears, that her own countdown had just begun.
Sato found the worker's name in old payroll records. Daniel Kessler, 29, hired 2 months before he vanished. The file was thin, no next of kin listed, no forwarding address, 1 photo of a tired man in a hard hat, smiling like the day had been ordinary. His sister, now in her 60s, remembered every detail. In his last letter home, Daniel had written that the foreman locked stragglers in the crawl space as a joke to speed up the crew, threatening to leave anyone slow sealed in overnight. He said he was afraid of the dark in there, afraid of how the walls seemed to lean closer the longer you stayed still. He'd also written, almost as an afterthought, that he was saving up to buy his sister a proper birthday gift that year, something small, something he'd never get the chance to give her. The letters stopped the week the wall was sealed. She never believed he'd skipped town. She always believed the building had swallowed him whole.
Sato went back with new eyes. If Daniel had been sealed in alive and never freed, the wall wasn't simply haunted, it was in some unbearable sense still occupied. She pressed her palm flat against the plaster where the knocking had come from and found it faintly warm, unnaturally so for an interior wall in winter, warm the way skin is warm. That night she didn't wait for 2:14. She spoke first, quietly, into the dark. "Daniel, I know what happened to you." The silence that answered was different from ordinary silence, thick, aware, listening back. Then, faint and ragged, she heard breathing on the other side of the plaster, like someone who'd held it in for 11 years and had just been given permission to let go. She didn't yet know if she'd offered comfort to something suffering or given something patient, exhausted, and furious a name to finally call her by. Sato brought in a structural crew under the pretense of a routine inspection and had them cut into the sealed crawl space at first light, standing watch with her weapon drawn, bracing for bones or for nothing or for something that was neither. The space inside was barely wide enough to stand in. Rusted tools lined one wall, furred with a decade of dust and damp. Near the far end, curled against a pipe casing, were the remains of a man, one arm outstretched toward a hairline gap in the boards where a sliver of hallway light must have once leaked through, the only light he'd had in the end. Scratched into the wood beside that reaching hand, in shallow, desperate grooves, gone soft with age, was a tally, not of days survived, of tenants. 4 marks, deep and old. A 5th, fainter, unmistakably fresh. The examiner confirmed it. Daniel Kessler, dead over a decade, likely of dehydration within days of being sealed in. But the tally of 5 didn't add up to 4 deaths plus his own. It matched 4 tenants who had died and 1 who had not died yet. Sato understood, standing under the morgue's flat fluorescent light, that the wall hadn't been cursed at random. It had been counting toward her specifically,
the next name in a sequence that had never once stopped since the day he was trapped. Not out of malice, the psych consultant offered carefully, out of 11 years of total isolation, twisting grief and terror into the only language left to speak, a countdown, repeated, because it no longer knew how to let a listener simply walk away. The 5th mark had been carved the exact night Sato moved in.
Sato had Daniel's remains removed and buried properly beside his sister's family plot. His name finally entered into the record, 11 years overdue. The building sealed the crawl space for good this time, concrete, not drywall, and Unit 604 was struck from every rental listing. The voice never came back. No counting, no knocking, no warm patch of plaster waiting behind the headboard. But Sato kept the recording from her second night there, the one where the voice paused every few seconds as if hoping someone would finally answer. She played it once, months later, alone in her own apartment, and swore that in the gap between 2 and 1 she could hear something faint that sounded almost like relief. She never played it again. Some doors, once closed, are better left that way, and some countdowns, once stopped, shouldn't be tested to see if they'd start over.